We should talk Pacers, right? We haven't talked Pacers yet.
Yes, and I'm excited because Caitlin Cooper went on the low post from Go Subscribe to Basketball She Wrote if you didn't already. I've not listened to the episode, which is good in the sense that I feel like I would just end up attributing everything I say to what she thinks. That's whatever happens whenever I read or listen to her. But it's also sad because it's like, I'm going to say some shit. I'm going to go back and listen to that podcast and be like, oh, like, no, I wish I could take back everything I literally just said about the Pacers. But go check out that episode. I love Caitlin Cooper. She's great. It's cool that she was on the low post. But the Pacers, like, what are your thoughts kind of going into the offseason? I have like we both, I'm sure, have their sort of cap situation here. We have Pascal Siakam's free agency. Where do you want to go with this? This is the question we have to ask. Where do the Pacers go from here, Grant?
Right. Like, so you can't avoid thinking that as they're in the process, as they were in the process of getting eliminated. And like, I don't know if it's just me kind of pushing back against the like, okay, now this is the conversation we have to have, and here's the things I got to start thinking about. But I just found myself just kind of like, it's fucking awesome that the Pacers were this good this year, and like that they found this kind of identity, that they know what they're going to be, that they swung big on a trade and it worked out, and it's just like, I don't know. It's nice that a team that didn't bottom out, that is like historically refused to bottom out, just found a way to like get itself back into the, like, we're serious. We're going to need to be taken seriously for a long time now without going the conventional route. So that was awesome. Like everything about the Pacers season to me is a huge win. I know you mentioned Caitlin Cooper. We had her on for the look ahead. And I don't think, I wish I could remember, but like, no, the level of success Indiana has had was not foreseen by anyone, including her, who knows more about the Pacers than anyone has or ever will. So like, also you add in, well, this was surprising, so that makes it even better. So where do they go from here? Like, I don't know if they need to. I mean, you said it's like the Siakam free agency. I think the report today I saw was like, I think Shams had it like they're going to max him, but it wasn't clear if that meant 5 years or 4. We've had that conversation about like, which of those do you give him? Which of those do you need to? Which of those was hypothetically agreed to before the trade was executed? But other than that, it's just kind of like, we hope Halliburton stays healthy all year and is an MVP candidate for more than the first, 30 games or whatever. And you just kind of run it back and you make some decisions about the center rotation. Maybe, like, I don't know, that you hope Jarris Walker makes an appearance at some point.
So the Pascal Siakam, because we need to get into like what we think they need, but I wanted to ask you this macro question. Because I think I think this is a lazy take, but I think people might compare this to when the Hawks reached the conference finals was that 2021?
Yes.
And it was just like, no, like they didn't belong there. And you could say, well, like the Knicks didn't have OG or Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, everyone was injured by the end of that series. This is different. It's so much different from that, in part because like everything just makes so much more sense when you're looking at what the Pacers have built between Halliburton and Siakam. And when you're talking about the Pacers offseason, I've seen people mention cap space. It's just, they don't have cap space because Siakam is coming back. Like, you don't make that trade if they give him, we've talked about this. So the 4-year max is from them is 189.5 and the 5-year max is 245.3. The 5-year max is, I still think I'd be pretty shocked if he gets the full boat over 5 years. If it's less over 5 years, it wouldn't surprise me, but that's the one. Like, do you have any thoughts on what you would expect this to be?
I think if I haven't mentioned this, I think Indiana, I would have no problem with Indiana going full 4-year max. I just don't think you have to go 5 at the full number.
Yeah.
And if they did go 5, I would only be like, I don't know, it's like I get a say in this. Like, I'd only be cool with it but like, if you do the full 5 years, it's got to be sub max, I think, by a decent amount. I just don't know if Siakam would want that necessarily. So, because you might want to just get back on the market again in 4 with the full max. But yeah, 4 years full max, you beat the market that way. Nobody else can offer him more over 4 years. And like the scenario of him leaving because, I want the 5th year seems crazy. So that's what I would be going for. And anything under the max in any capacity, I think, is probably a win for Indiana.
Yeah. And I mean, even if it's just the 4-year max, I think that ends up being a win for them. And they, I don't know that we learned anything about them in this series looking at, okay, well, what do they need going in the offseason. It's like they do kind of need like a bigger wing
Yes.
defender type. Maybe that's Jarris Walker. They could certainly use like a Buddy Hield analog, as stupid as that says. I know it's good that Tyrese Halliburton has that experience off the ball, but you'd also like to not have to see him necessarily used in all those instances. I also am wondering how and Andrew Nemhard was good all year, but like this emergence of Andrew Nemhard, and you have TJ McConnell entering the final year of his deal. Like, what does that, like, where does Benedict Mathurin fit into this group now? You could also talk about this is a team where, okay, like we have they have their two bigs of the future, but then you kind of look at it and say, well, is rebounding an issue for them at all? And it's like they rebounded fine. I think they had a fairly high offensive rebounding rate against the Celtics, but the Celtics did not. They were playing relative, like they weren't playing dual big lineups with Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis. So you could just look at Indiana was not a good defensive rebounding team in the playoffs or the regular season. And so that's an area that it gets you into. No, we're not moving on from Siakam or Turner, but do we bring back Obi Toppin? Do we extend Isaiah Jackson? It gets you into, and then I think it impacts the type of forward maybe that you would want to, or wing that you would want to target. Can they pitch in there at all? But before throwing it to you, their financial situation is going to allow them to do some stuff, because even if you pencil in Siakam for his max salary next season, and then you're going to keep, I would assume that you're going to keep the Obi Toppin cap, well, maybe not the cap hold because it's $20 million. And then you also have the not Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith has a player option for 5.4. I guess he'll decline it, although he wasn't really playing prominent minutes for them by the end. But like, this is my point being, this is a team that if you re-sign Pascal Siakam to his max, you should still have access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, so over $12 million, the biannual exception, which is almost like $5 million now or whatever. And then there's also a chance that you're able to keep, I would say, Obi Toppin and or Jalen Smith under sort of that structure. So you do have moves. And by the way, this is in addition to, you're going to have, I think, three tradable future first round picks in addition to swaps, and Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker if you really want to go balls to the walls here. And I don't even know why I just phrased it that way. But what are you, when you're looking at what they need and then their ability to make different degrees of moves, if you're running this team, how are you going about this offseason in terms of, one, what is your single biggest priority aside from re-signing Pascal Siakam? And then two, how aggressive are you willing to be about going to address that single biggest priority?
Yeah, I think my number one priority would be finding somebody to guard the guys that Aaron Nesmith is guarding, but are a little too big for Aaron Nesmith usually. So I think that was maybe the first thing you said, is like, you need a bigger wing / combo forward type guy that is gonna, that isn't just giving up huge amounts of size to some of the wing matchups that Nesmith has to guard. And like, it's weird. Looking at the roster just generally, it's weird that like, I really like Nesmith. Like he's one of my favorite role players, but I think that is a spot they need to upgrade. I don't know how you're going to address the rebounding stuff, like without fundamentally changing what I like about this team a lot.
Maybe
Like,
something, it's like, oh, is Andre Drummond coming off the bench for you now?
yeah, you do it that way, but it's like, I like the spacing Turner provides, and Turner's had some incredible moments in these playoffs. Like, I'm not messing with his minutes. Obviously, you're not messing with Siakam's minutes. Halliburton's locked in, so it's kind of like at the 2-3 spot that I'd look for. It weirdly, I don't like this. They cannot get him. They will not get him. But it's funny that like OG Anunoby feels like he'd be a really good fit here. It's just like, well, the Raptors tried that with him and Siakam. There was a ceiling on it. But you know what I mean? Someone with real size as a forward wing that is going to make threes. Doesn't have to be some, like, you can't find the guy that checks that box and also checks the Buddy Hield box, because that player doesn't really exist. But
If
like,
they did, holy shit.
if they did, that's a max player. Who are we describing? OG Anunoby's defense with Buddy Hield's 3-point shooting. Is there a person?
You know what? It's hard. It's hard to think about, like, checking the shooting box and like that. There's just nobody.
It's not there. So I guess if you got to pick one, I think I'd skew defense, obviously, because this team's offense is going to be fucking awesome no matter what. So I think that's the way I'd go. I don't really have I don't know if I have a player in mind.
I got.
You got some for me?
Well, here's one. Do you think looking at free agents and who they could realistically get, does someone like Malik Beasley do enough to fulfill some of the Buddy Hield stuff?
I think he gets you pretty close to Buddy Hield. I mean, I think probably with the same or like worse issues defensively.
I
But
was
like
gonna
that,
the other name like free agent that stood out to me for them was Derrick Jones Jr.
oh my God, that'd be
You
fun.
think that would be like because they have the spacing to make it work? I don't know if the 3-point shooting will hold here. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton's as transcendent a playmaker as anyone in the league at this point. Uh, so I like he's not you kind of when you look at him, it's he's a little spindly, so it feels like they should get a stronger wing. But it's like look at look
Right.
at who he has defended and how well he has done, and then you just throw in. I know he's getting a little older, but like the athleticism and pop is still there.
Yeah, I think he'd be phenomenal. And like I haven't really thought about what I think he's gonna get in free agency, but to go from a minimum to like the full mid level, which might be on the high end for him, but also maybe not because
I guess like would you go like are you
I don't
giving him
know.
3-4 years for that? And Dallas has ways of I think he would stay in Dallas if because they have ways of accessing the full mid level, which is the only way they could keep him
Yeah.
is to use the mid level because they're not 120% raise off a minimum isn't going to do it for the
No.
non-bird rights. But if they can't or they won't for some I don't know why if they have the mid level to give or he's willing to come back for a chunk of that. I think at this point you almost have to keep him, but so Indy's not necessarily in a position to outbid unless Dallas's books become so like Dallas should as of right now they have ways of just having the full mid level and then running back basically their
Yeah.
current
Yeah.
roster, and they could they could trade Tim Hardaway Jr. for a cheaper player if they need to open up more wriggle room beneath the tax. But that's a name I stood out. I guess my main point of that was if you're the thing that we both agree, by the way, because I agree with you that their biggest need doesn't feel like it could be addressed in free agency, not just because of the resources they have available where it's not actual cap space. And if they have actual cap space, something ridiculous has happened. Did Siakam leave?
Yeah.
Like I just
They got bigger problems if they have
right.
cap space.
And then that's when you get into okay, well, what will they do on the trade market and how aggressive should they be?
Well, that's the more interesting question, right? Because like on the one hand, you say, well, we got Tyrese Halliburton. He's in the very early stages of his new max. Like we're, nothing urgent here. But then you also are about to max out Pascal Siakam for his early 30s. And so like you're not all in by any stretch, but like your team's going to get fairly expensive and you just won a couple playoff rounds and Tyrese Halliburton was on track to be like a top 5 MVP guy before he got hurt and still was an all NBA player. So like, what are you waiting for? I guess that suggests you need to kind of operate with a little more urgency than you might normally think for a Pacers team. I guess too, some people are going to say they beat two teams that had a bunch of injuries. Like getting really aggressive now might be a mistake because we're overestimating how good this team is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something to that. That's not a ridiculous argument to make. But I think if you have Siakam that you're going to pay all this money and you have Halliburton entering his prime, like it's probably go time. So I think I'd skew towards more urgency. But like, what does that look like? Are you thinking you're going to so you could put together some, salary pretty easily to get a good number and you throw those 3 picks you mentioned in there? Like
I was wrong, by the way. It's because of how they structured the Toronto deal. So they're giving up the 24 first and the 26 first, I believe. They can trade 2 first round picks and 4 swaps.
Then like who's the guy like that
Well,
you're willing?
I think because you said urgency, and if you were putting, I won't say everything, but let's say mostly everything on the table, there's a level of urgency. Okay, well then this is like it almost.
Mm-hmm.
But the combination of, and I'm not saying everything, but 2 firsts, up to 4 swaps, Jarris Walker and Benedict Mathurin, does that get you into the Mikal Bridges discussion?
I think it should. I feel like Brooklyn just based on some of the offers they have not accepted for him, just might say like, nah, that's not enough. If you're Indiana, I think Bridges is pretty darn close to like the type of player we were talking about. He's not the volume shooter, but like in a smaller role, that guy's been lights out from 3. So I mean,
and the combination of him and Nesmith defensively, because you talked about upgrading the Nesmith spot, it could also just be like well, maybe we're having Neesmith and Mikal Bridges play
Right.
together, and it's we're
With
bringing Nemhard
Siakam
off
and
the
Turner,
bench.
and oh my god, that gets very fun. Just thinking about
The
that.
but and so I think I would do it if you told me it's Mikal Bridges coming, I would give up everything because I think that this team is that close. If you could keep, especially if it's okay, you don't need to send Neesmith out in that deal. But now that gets you into another interesting discussion because Mikal Bridges is cheap relative to his just the level of player that he is. If you're Indy and you're not moving Siakam or Halliburton, and then it's, I mean, like you ideally don't want to move Turner, I wouldn't think. Your matching salary becomes all right. It's TJ McConnell is your fourth highest paid player as of right now, behind Siakam. Well, Siakam's max, Turner, and Halliburton next year at 9.3. And maybe Obi Toppin ends up making more, but you're not going to end up like moving him. Oh, he's their fifth. Neesmith, excuse me. I was saying if you don't want to move him. So TJ McConnell at 9.3 becomes your fifth highest paid player. So like you're looking at him. Matherin makes 7.2. Jarris Walker's at 6.4. Did Jalen Smith pick up his player option? If he didn't, you have Isaiah Jackson at 4.4. So like whatever they do, and by the way, they have Ben Shepherd floating around. Like he's shown some things defensively and been able to move
I mean,
away
he
from the ball
played a
offense.
lot. Like
Yeah.
I mean, he was
So
in
they
the
have
rotation.
stuff, but like you would have to give up so much of it to protect your core when it comes to salary, because like let's just use Jeremy Grant as an example. I'm not saying they should go after him, but because his number is so high, you're now consolidating like 3 or 4 if you're not trading Turner, Siakam, or Halliburton, like you're consolidating 3 or 4 guys into one, and Jeremy Grant's just not the player you want to do that for.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, this is what's facing like every team that is, in this position that's trying to upgrade. It's just like Jeremy Grant isn't the guy. It's like you're not getting Bridges and Jeremy Grant's not it. And so like where does that leave you? I if you had to choose between including McConnell or Matherin in a trade,
Don't make me answer that. I would pick Matherin at this point
to trade.
I think because
I would
TJ
too, by the
McConnell is
way.
going to give you more of off the bench in theory of what you need, but I also kind of understand the whole, well, if you're playing Nemhard and TJ McConnell and so many of one of their minutes is going to overlap with Halliburton, because both those guys are better with the ball, specifically McConnell, are you eating too much into Halliburton's role? And as Benedict Mathurin still has a ways to go, he's probably the best off-ball player of those three. I guess you could make a case for Nemhard at that point. So like that, you get into that discussion, but I would pick Matherin just because in a vacuum, I still think he should yield. Like if you were going to get a first round pick for TJ McConnell, you probably just need to make the move because you have Nemhard and Halliburton.
Right.
But I think Benedict Matherin in theory, because it still has a little bit of the mystery box element to it, is the better trade asset. And therefore, like I would say move him.
But also there would be riots in Indiana if you traded TJ McConnell at this point.
That's like true too. Isn't the statue already up?
Probably. What's the statue doing? What pose is it in?
Is it? I think it's like him sneaking baseline for the steal, like crouching.
Probably that. Yeah,
is that the one?
I think that's probably it. What a great series for McConnell, or great playoffs for McConnell.
So you run into these like names that you could think of, and it just gets the player that they need is one that's, or their single biggest priority feels like it could be the single biggest priority of so many teams.
Yeah,
that it's just not that they're gonna have to overpay to get them. It feels like it's going to require a level of aggression that I still don't think that they're going to show, just because it would be even the Siakam trade. I like that they kind of got quote unquote rewarded by getting to the conference finals. I like seeing teams go for it, but that was like an ultra reasonable price to pay for a borderline all NBA player.
And like, again, I mean, it wasn't risk free. Like the guy's going to be a free agent. So it's like that's part. No, I mean, it was bold, but it was like, it was the appropriate level of risk for that type of player for this team at that time. Like, I think that was fine. I would also say, like, I know I said I might skew towards some urgency just because of how good the team, like, I would be totally okay if they ran it back, like, I think that's fine. I think that's part of the, like, well, they overachieved and we're all happy about it. It was a fun season. If they bring this exact group back, I don't think anybody's mad about it, and they could absolutely sell it as like, we didn't think with the assets we have right now that the right guy was out there. So we're going to be patient. We're going to, that's an easy sell to me because of how much this team overachieved relative to like preseason expectations.
So I disagree, mostly because I think that highly and urgently also of the window they kind of have with Siakam there. And But I would agree to the extent of, okay, well, we didn't go out and try to get Mikal Bridges or Jeremy Grant or just like insert bigger name.
We're not
We
going
didn't try
Zach
and roll
Levine
over Houston
shopping
for
or
Tari
whatever.
Eason. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I was saying we're not going Zach Levine shopping because we got to do something. It's not going to be that.
Right. But I do think like if you told me like it needs to be like we spent like if we have the full non-tax, but like we spent it and it was did that Caleb Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Did we poach Caleb Martin from Miami, who has to deal with second apron concerns if he opts out of his contract? They might not be able to. Well, they could pay him because he's his own free agent, but maybe they don't want to because of the second apron concerns. Is it we went out, we traded for Dorian Finney-Smith. So guys who are not solving all your problems in a vacuum, but they make you better enough to where it's okay. We're banking on some development from Jarris Walker here. We didn't upend any of like our young. We didn't trade Shepard. We didn't trade Matherin. But like I do think that it's. And this is such a weird way to frame it. I want them to get someone that you could envision potentially closing games for them.
Sure.
And so if that's a Dorian Finney-Smith is probably not maybe he is the worst player where it's, well, maybe he's not closing games for you because you have Turner, Siakam, Halliburton are just locked in. And then I think Neesmith might be almost a lock. And then it's, well, does Nembhard make more sense in certain instances? But he would be in the conversation for one of the final two spots, I would think, in addition to Shepard maybe being in there and Jarris Walker. If you're going to run it back, though, you need like a monster sophomore campaign from Jarris Walker at that point.
And you need Matherin.
I feel like that's an uncomfortable spot to be.
Oh, for sure. And you would need Matherin to like take a pretty big step. I think if you're looking to do
you?
No, I think if you run it back and you say like, again, which I would be okay. I'm being conservative. Like I'd be okay with it. I think it's justifiable. It's a huge ask for Jarris Walker, who like just didn't play basically. But I think you'd need him to be, I don't know where in the rotation he'd need to be. He'd need to feature, though, I think Walker would. And then Matherin, I think, would need to make it like, oh, is it Neesmith or is it Matherin tonight? Like, it's got to be like that level of like where Matherin is like clearly bringing stuff to the table every night, doesn't feel superfluous, which to me, like right now, he kind of does. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel to me like Indiana needs Matherin. Like, I don't know what he does. That's like, you got to have this on the floor. That he needs to get to that level where it's like, oh, he's giving us something that we can't get from Neesmith, Nembhard, McConnell, whatever that is.
As of right now, is there a chance? I'm not trying to, it's been so long since we saw him play, and I do think he made some strides this year. So I want to make that clear before I know a lot of Pacers fans love the idea of Matherin. Mm-hmm. Is how many of it next year, let's just say they run it back. TJ McConnell, Ben Shepard, Andrew Nembhard. How many of those guys are in front of Benedict Matherin in the rotation? Is it all three?
That's the thing. If it's I have never been the biggest Matherin fan through his long and storied career. He's like been around for 10 minutes, but like I've never been my favorite guy. I think, I guess what I was saying is like he has to be above a couple of those guys for the Pacers to get like to really justify like not making a move. I don't know if he would be, right? Like basically just imagine he was healthy for this playoff run. It's like McConnell was like, you had to have McConnell out there on the floor for long stretches. Like Nembhard played his ass off, like especially without Halliburton, and Neesmith is like, well, you had no better wing defensive option. Like, so again, I don't think Matherin deserves to be ahead of any of those guys. Shepard maybe, but like we've seen so little of Shepard outside of, you know, this playoff run really that like, I don't know.
He endeared himself to me with his defensive effort in summer league. And there's just, once you do that, I have him ahead of Tyrese Halliburton in the rotation.
You're in. Okay, that's fair. I mean, do you think Matherin's ahead of any of those guys?
I think you could probably make a case that he should be ahead of McConnell just because of how limiting McConnell can be if he doesn't have the ball on offense. But that still requires, okay, well then Benedict Matherin needs to make heavier lifts on defense, which is like the appeal of Ben Shepard, who kind of doesn't need the ball, works his ass off defensively. So I think he honestly has a case above all of them, but it's a case. It's not inarguable.
The Pacers would very much prefer that it was inarguable in favor of Matherin. Like that would be a best case, like where he was just like, and that's not, you know, he's going into his third year.
2 seasons of basketball, yeah. Like
if he takes like a decent sized leap, it's like, oh yeah, no, right. This is the guy we took in the lottery. This is what he's supposed to be. Everything, we're on track. Like that's totally plausible. I just, so far, I'm not super confident that he's going to be more than like a 6-man scoring type. I know that's pigeonholing him really early, but that's just the vibe I get so far.
So just very quickly, Siakam back. Do you think
Mhm.
Obi Toppin is back?
That's a tough one, right? He's restricted. You mentioned like 10 million for him, or to get up, over the McConnell figure, maybe. Like,
Yeah, I mean, he should. I think he gets more than the 9.3 that McConnell's make. His cap hold is over 20. I don't think he's getting that
no, no,
much.
no. Do you think he's getting like maybe like the question is, isn't he more valuable to some other teams than he is to the Pacers? Just especially if you think Jarris Walker is going to have like any significant role going forward.
Here's my thing with that is because the speed at which the Pacers play and the spacing they have is that he because like
Well,
he's
good
a
point.
one position player.
Yeah.
And there are probably very few teams that have room for that in their front court at the moment.
Yeah, I'm asking because I don't know. Like, it's a weird because the style is tailor made for him to do all the things that he's best at, and that just won't be true really almost anywhere else. But it's like, how valuable can you be a serious, like, if you want to be a real Eastern Conference contender? Can you give a guy that's super limited and like has a niche skill set, you know, the mid level, or like that close to that number? Like, I just I don't know. I would guess he'll probably be back. I think they can match. Like, I don't think anyone's coming over the top with like 15 a year or 20 a
Right.
year.
I think you might as well just preserve the salary slot
Yeah,
at the
there
very
you
least.
go. Good point. Yeah, maybe that's it. So Siakam back, Toppin back, if only for asset preservation, maybe.
Jalen Smith, do you think he winds up entering free agency? 5.4 million player option.
Man, I think it might be time for me to give up on him. Is he going to do better than, like, he's given up 5? That means he'd probably want to be able to sign like a multi-year deal worth like 8 to 10. Like, I don't know if that's out there for him.
I just with the way that Toppin ended up playing in the postseason too, it feels like he will if Smith enters free agency. And I also think that even Jackson getting him on an extension will be a higher priority than bringing back Smith. And I just don't know which team is going to. I mean, I guess there are teams that could use a floor spacing big, but a lot of them are just going to be teams that are going to offer him less than 5. Like Phoenix might like to reunite with Jalen Smith at this point, but
Mhm.
that'll be a minimum.
Right. Yeah, no, I think ultimately he's not, like, there's almost no way that I could imagine where his 24-25 salary will be greater than the player option who'd have to decline to sign a new deal
Oh,
someplace.
interesting. I'm just wondering, like, does Detroit like we just need spacing? Let's just go get Jalen Smith at 10 million for 2 years or something.
I mean, good for him. I'm taking that if I'm him. But I would bet he's going to be back, and because he'll just pick that option up, and
I
then
I think I don't know what's gonna happen with his player option. I honestly don't have a feel. I'm gonna say he's not back because if he
okay,
opts in, I think he'll get traded.
okay, yeah, I think that would be the smarter course, because you don't, especially if you bring Toppin back, like, he's your 4th big guy, like, and maybe 5th if Walker can play up a little bit. So yeah, he's not exactly integral to the operation.
And do you think from TJ McConnell, Andrew Nemhard, Ben Shepherd, Benedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, how many of those guys are back? Or how many? I'm gonna set the over under of those guys being traded at 0.5.
I think I'd go under. Like, why?
All
I mean,
5 of them are just coming back. All right.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm going to manifest my I'm cool with it if you run it back thinking.
You went from this team needs to express urgency to like bring
Well, you
everybody
can tell
back.
I was like really trying to waffle on the urgency thing. I talked myself into it. I think in my heart of hearts, I'm okay with this team looking very similar and banking on like a couple of key organic growth plays. And if those don't work out, then you maybe start thinking about what to do with those 2 firsts.